So if you're watching this is simply for students who need to catch up, and you are still responsible for putting this information in your notes, which you will receive a grade for. You also need to ask your classmates if there were any extras, because there will be extras added to the slides. I will read the slide, then I will tell you to pause it, and you can write the information down, and then we'll go to the next slide. So we start with imperialism. And this is America as we are a teenager, and we start to leave the boundaries of the East Coast to the West Coast. And this idea of imperialism is this: it's political strategy or practice or policy where a nation extends its power by acquiring territory or gaining political or economic control over other areas. I would definitely highlight that extends its power, because that's what we look at to do through this imperialism. So I would pause and then go on to the next. Our next slide is this idea of white man's burden. It's a task that white colonizers believed that they had to impose their civilization on inhabitants of their colonies. Now, this is where America looked at being able to go to these other places, and it was our duty to go and share and basically have our civilization, which we believed was the most powerful, to go to other places and impose it on their inhabitants. So, pause. Now, we had pineapple. One of the first places that we see this imperialism is in the annexation of Hawaii. Hawaii is the formal incorporation of all of the islands of Hawaii, and it was made largely because of two reasons. One was they had pineapple and sugar. Queen Liliuokalani did not necessarily want this to happen, and yet America took this over for an economic reason there. Pause. Our next one is, we look at the book, The Influence of Sea Power on History. Mr. Mahan, Alfred Thayer Mahan, wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power on History from 1660 to 1783. And it was the analysis of every important country in the world had a strong navy. So we use this as a reason to go out and create what would be called coaling stations. You can see the ships in the middle there. They were run by coal, and we needed places to fill them up. We use Quick Trip as an example of that. Now, not all people believed in this idea of imperialism. You had some heavyweight people in the world of America, like Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, that had this thing called the Anti-Imperialist League. They believed that the actions of imperialism contradicted the American ideals of self-governance and non-interventionism. So what that meant is we were a colony at one point, and we shouldn't go and be a colony or create colonies. So there was a push there. Go ahead and pause. Now, we're going to go into this concept of, this idea of the Spanish-American War. Now, you guys in class have our DBQs with the political cartoons that you worked on. But here, we're going to look at just a few items. Number one, the idea of yellow journalism. Yellow journalism is a style of reporting that emphasizes sensationalism over fact. So making big, fancy stories was much more important than having facts that took place. Now, the next thing is this concept of jingoism. Jingoism is a perspective that advocates the use of threats or military force in foreign relations as opposed to finding peaceful and political or diplomatic solutions. Here we're talking about the Spanish-American War, and we will look at that in greater detail in class with our project that we're doing. Now, our next one is we are looking at types, after the Spanish-American War. Number 8, post-Spanish-American War, the United States emerged as a superpower, a world power, because we had increased our territorial claims. We went all the way from the Caribbean to Southeast Asia with the Philippines. And that famous painting or famous drawing up there of the American bald eagle stretching out across the globe for this. Now, our acquisitions, what we gained as a result of the Spanish-American War. We were looking at Cuba, the Philippines, and also Puerto Rico and Guam. So America had gone in a very short period from a group that was fighting a civil war to now we are branching out and going basically around the world. Now, the next thing is we're going to look at 3 different types of diplomacy and the 3 presidents that followed this. The first was called Big Stick Diplomacy. Big Stick Diplomacy was from a African parable where it said, you speak softly, but carry a big stick. Now, what this was, is there was an unspoken threat of military action if you didn't follow us. So we used in class the example of somebody asking if we could have a day off, and I said no. And then all of a sudden they take a gun out and they set it on the desk. Of course, that is just an example. It did not happen. But then there's that proposed threat, unspoken threat that you have there. Now, our next one is dollar diplomacy. Oh, also back to Big Stick Diplomacy, right down to the left, Franklin Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, right down Teddy Roosevelt. Now, our next one is dollar diplomacy. To the left of number 11, right down Taft. Dollar diplomacy is where you use economic power to influence governments and markets. Someone would say, Dowdy, can we have a day off? And I say no, and then they ask again, and they pull out, as you all say, fat stacks or bands or whatever you would call it. So that was the example there. You can go ahead and pause. And now, our last one for today is missionary diplomacy. Missionary diplomacy is the idea of, and highlight that moral responsibility to promote democracy and peace abroad. It's the idea that we are going to go out, and it's our moral responsibility that we are going to share religion. We're going to share our culture with other cultures. Very similar to what we do on spring break, and right now on our fall break, where there are groups of students that go in the mission field and share, the love of Christ. So those are those. So this is section 3, the first 12 items.